Hello everyone, welcome back to OCD Recovery's YouTube channel. I got on one of my super snazzy shirts today. It's one of my, I only pull it out every so often because it's just completely ridiculous. But today I wanted to do another video about some common myths that I have been seeing in the Facebook group, conversations I've had with people in the OCD community, and maybe where some people might get the advice wrong and how to go about it in a way where basically it's the way forward. So the first myth, we're going to jump right into it. But before I go any further, actually, if you could please subscribe down below. Great stuff going up on the YouTube channel. As I say in a lot of the videos, one of the cool things about this channel is you have so many people who have made tremendous progress in their OCD recovery journey, coming from sometimes really bad scenarios. And you get to see different perspectives on different ways on how we see things, which is really cool. I was talking about that with Kirsty actually this morning when she was watching my COVID videos because I had COVID really badly. So number one, people, specifically family, friends, need to understand OCD. Now, there are a lot of people in the OCD community that work with people that will tell you that you need them to understand. That if they understand, it makes your recovery journey better. This is probably one of the most biggest misconceptions in OCD recovery. Nobody needs to understand you. First of all, how could they understand you? It's like someone who loses their legs. You could sympathize with them, but you'll never understand what it's truly like to not have legs. There's nothing wrong with that. You can accept that person for who they are. There's always going to be misinformed advice in everything on earth. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's OCD recovery, getting a contractor to come to your house and do plumbing. There's always going to be things in your life that people just might not understand or you don't agree with. And that's completely okay. Now, the problem with you needing people to understand you, this plays into conditional self-acceptance, which we don't go by at OCD Recovery. We go to the teachers and Dr. Albert Ellis, the books in the reading list, Unconditional Self, Life, and Other Acceptance. This is conditional other acceptance. It's not unconditional other acceptance. We would prefer for them to understand. We don't need them to understand. There's more than likely always going to be people on earth, especially in this country, they're like, oh, I'm OCD because, I like things organized. That doesn't matter. They just don't understand. And let me tell you something right now. If none of us, ladies and gentlemen, had chronic OCD, we would probably be still using that same exact terminology. But now that we have chronic OCD, well, whether it's chronic or not, and you understand the disorder, you understand that we don't actually need anyone to understand. Or, you thought, wow, I used to say I was OCD when I really wasn't OCD at all. And there's a disorder at the end of OC. So it's a disorder. We understand that. They probably won't, and that's completely okay. So again, the recovery comes from us. I'll talk about this a couple times in here. When you believe that other people must understand you, you are now relying on them to help you with your recovery. That is not true whatsoever. Again, we would prefer for them to understand. It might have benefits, but we don't need them to. So anyone who's telling you that you need other people to understand you to benefit your journey is, I'm sorry, giving you very poor advice. Probably don't have a great understanding of OCD. Like most people, we can't be mad at them. The OCD is still in the dark ages. We've made tremendous progress, especially with Rob's Bill and other people out there who do understand. But most people who say they're therapist, OCD specialists, whether they're a coach, a psychologist, or a psychiatrist, they know very little about OCD. And there's nothing wrong with that because we wouldn't know it if we didn't have it. So ignoring the thoughts, images, sensations. So I get asked this quite frequently in the What's Up groups or on, what's the difference between ignoring the thoughts and engaging with the core fears? I did a really good video on this recently where I talked about the difference between engaging with the core fear and actually just going about your day. But here's the problem. When people use ignoring your thoughts or thoughts are just thoughts, which can have some benefit as a primary source of recovery, here's the big problem. Ignoring in its basic sense premises the opposite of acceptance. Accepting something as the way it is, whether it's an unwanted image, sensation, thoughts, urges, feelings, when you basically ignore it, especially in the beginning of OCD recovery, because yes, you can actually per se ignore some stuff later on to your recovery journey, but in the beginning, this more than likely won't work because you're saying to yourself, I need to ignore them. I need to ignore them because they bother me so much. I don't want them there. Well, that's the opposite of acceptance, and that's actually how you don't move in the direction you want to move. It's a very fine line. It's not that ignoring the thoughts has no benefit. It's just that if you're using it as a primary source of recovery, for most people, especially at the chronic level, you're only going to get so far. And again, this is the main thing that Rob talks about. Ignoring the thoughts is not the same as an internal surrender. An internal surrender is letting everything be there, no matter what it is, and just going about your day as best as you can. Number 3, exposures are all we need. Now, I've talked about this a lot before. Yes, ERP, exposure response prevention, is the gold standard, as they would say, quotations, the gold standard. Well, we now know through anecdotal experience and talking to people in the community that have gone to places and only worked on exposures that they've only gotten so far. Now, I made a Facebook post today talking about the benefits of exposures and behavior changes. Dr. Albert Ellis did say that, you can dispute your fears all you want, but if you don't change your behaviors, this is the example I use for somatic OCD. Let's say that you dispute that noticing your sensation is not the end of the world and maybe it wouldn't ruin your life, but you still partake in avoidance behaviors, you more than likely aren't going to get the results you want to get. Hold on one second. Go that way. No. He's going to jump on the bed and then the camera's going to fall over. I love filming videos when Erica isn't here. So that's really important. Exposures are definitely important because that's how you show your brain there's nothing to be scared of. But if you are still deathly afraid and you're not looking at the core fear, you might only get so far. And that's something that a lot of people get wrong in this community. We weren't even doing this 20 years ago. It was just exposures. We didn't do anything about fears and stuff like that. And if there was, it was minimal. Number 4, recovery is putting up with symptoms. I see a lot of people that work for foundations, a lot of people I've seen videos on talking about that. They basically use coasting and plateauing as recovery. I promise you there's something much further beyond that. I haven't reached that point, nor do I actually think about reaching that point. That's something that happens too. When you're really far along in your OCD recovery journey, you're not thinking, recovery. You just move through life. And things just potentially get better. Sometimes they get worse. And you basically get to this place where you will deem recovery, which is the absence of chronic anxiety, guilt and shame, and intrusive thoughts, images, all that lose its intrusiveness. You basically can't even tell you have OCD anymore. It might rear its head once in a while, but you have the tools to understand. This is why I did the video yesterday that wasn't posted yet on the importance of maintaining your recovery. This is maintaining recovery of anything. If you had an addiction problem, OCD recovery, anything like that. Yeah, you have to maintain it, and that's super, super, super important. So again, the myth is basically that plateauing or coasting. And what happens with coasting is we humans are very, I don't want to use the word obsessive, but we like comfort and we don't like changing or challenging ourselves. So we might coast for a little bit. You can accept yourself. We've all coasted. I've coasted. Everyone's coasted. Every moderator. But then you're going to get to a point where you realize you're coasting and it's time to progress forward. And that is what most people will stop at, that plateau, because this is why a great example on why people stop. Oh, I took a 12-week CBT course or REBT course. I'm done. I'm good to go. That's not how it works. Anyone that's selling you on like a weekly course, there is benefit in that. Of course, there's always pros and cons with everything, most things, but that's not how it works. Because then people think they're just going to get to that deadline and have all the tools. You being taught something is almost, I don't want to say useless, but it's not the merit you think it is. When you put things into practice, that's where the benefit comes from. Putting things into practice. And then number 5. I have to be careful about how I word this. No one really wants to talk about this, but there's definitely some validity to it. Number 5 with OCD, dealing with someone to help you. Anyone will do. The most important factor in recovery from the outside sources that you don't have control with, like going about working on your beliefs, going about your exposures, yourself, is that person needs to have a pretty strong foundation about OCD. Now, I've seen some horror stories. Friends of mine, people I know that didn't even know they were getting reassurance. The problem is a lot of these people that are helping you really do want to get you better. It's not that they're out maliciously. They're not sitting in their bed thinking, oh, I can't wait to just make Nick be stuck forever. I hate Nick and I hate his shirt. Let's get him stuck. No, they actually want to help. The problem is the disorder is so intertwined that if you don't have it, it's hard to actually see in between the cracks. I always use the example of when you go into like a spa and the wall, the waterfall wall with the cracks. Knowing about the water on top is what most people know. Usually harm OCD and contamination OCD. If you ask the average person that calls himself a specialist, doesn't matter what their background is, on say somatic OCD, solipsism, false memory, real event, these off types of fears, they have no idea what's going on because they don't understand that there isn't actually direct exposures. So most of the stuff I hear on somatic OCD, the stuff that I've actually come through, is utterly false. And people get mad at me when I say that because they're like, well, you know, you're not a licensed person. I say, well, that's okay. You can believe what you want. Always try what you think is the best way. And if it doesn't work, you have to reevaluate and move forward. That's how you go about anything in life. You do something, you test it, research. You form a hypothesis, you test it, and then you basically have data results. And if that doesn't work, you try again. This is the same exact way with OCD recovery. But a lot of people, you know, someone will say to me, I've been with this therapist for 3.5 years and I haven't changed. Well, okay, it's time to reevaluate what's going on and move forward. It's not that we want to chase discomfort all the time, but if you're just always comfortable with OCD recovery, you might not be working in the right direction. So this is also important to cover too. They will not bring you to recovery. The only person that's going to bring you to recovery is yourself. Rob, myself, any of the moderators, any of the books, they're just tools to learn. And then you have to apply that, whether you have someone walking with you through graded exposures, if it's really severe and so forth. But you are the one that has the ability to not partake in these compulsive behaviors. Now, if you do in the beginning, which you probably will, even though you have the ability to never do it again, you do have that ability. No matter what anyone tells you, you got to show yourself some self-compassion. Oliver did a really good video on this. He also talks about a woman, I think her name is Kristen Neff, who works with Brene Brown, who's a researcher, I believe, at the same school in Texas on self-compassion. That's important. This is why there's multiple aspects to the recovery journey. So this is the last thing I want to end the video with. If the person you're working with, and it's chronic, it's any OCD or any type of emotional distress problems, and they don't understand unconditional self-life and other acceptance, more than likely you're not going to get underneath the fear. Some people don't need to look into the core fear. Remember, there's a difference between looking in the core fear and then engaging with thoughts as they come. I did a huge video again, like I said, about a week ago on this. Kirsty's done videos on this. Oliver's done videos on this. Hannah's done videos on this. Rob's done a ton of videos. There is a clear difference. If you've tried something and you've done exposures and exposures like Oliver did, and it wouldn't unlatch, maybe got 20%, 50% better, you'll have to look into the core fear. 10, 15 minutes a day, looking at the core fear and bringing that down. If the person you're working with says these words to you, going into acceptance is engaging with the thought, that's a compulsion, they don't know what they're talking about. And it's okay that they don't know what they're talking about because most people don't know what they're talking about. Most people don't know what they're talking about in every single profession on earth. Plumbing, contracting, my profession, medical doctors, stuff like that. Just because you have something or the credentials, which we can talk about, that leads to major conditional self-acceptance and not accepting yourself for who you are. Again, there's nothing wrong with getting advanced degrees. A lot of people use that to boost themselves up in the conditional sense, especially in the realm I see every single day of my life. So if they're not working with acceptance, you more than likely might need to get someone else that understands acceptance. So, and that's key. And that's really, really key. A lot of people don't want to talk about that because they think exposures are the way only, or moving with uncertainty. If I just moved with uncertainty and that was it, I promise you I would not see the results I'm at right now. I can almost guarantee you. Can't go certain, but I can almost guarantee. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe down below and have a great day.